Welcome to the Sam and Sam Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. My name is Sam McGinnis, one of your co-hosts for the Sam and Sam Show. I'd like to welcome on my co-host, Sam Teets. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, McGinnis. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good myself, minus the Super Bowl, but we'll get to that. Today we're going to mix it up a little bit and actually start with player comparison. So let's get right into it. Teets is probably very confused.
So you throw a player comparison. Take a second to get the numbers and everything on the screen. But we're looking at some hockey-based stuff, so I'm not going to be able to guess this player comparison. You know that already, though.
These are two different player comparisons, by the way, but they make an ultimate point for me, so we'll bring it up. So this is player comparison 1 right here.
All right, so player 1 on the top, player 2 on the bottom. Do you want to enlighten me? Because I can't even begin to make an educated guess here on who this is.
Okay, so the wins should be pretty obvious. So the higher the number on the save percentage is better. So that's a 91.3% save percentage versus a 900, so better. And the goals against average should always be a lower number. So I think you can pretty clearly see who's the better player, at least for this, at that point in time. So you can throw up the second one now.
All right, second one.
All right, pretty much the same deal. I threw in games played so you can see a little bit of the difference. There is 31 versus 12, but 1 win to 16, and the numbers also show the difference there. Now, I want you to put the first one back up real quick.
All right.
Okay. So I kind of threw you for a loop today. This is the same player.
Different years?
Yes, this is the same player. This was Bobrovsky the year before he left the Columbus Blue Jackets versus the year he left the Columbus Blue Jackets to go with the Panthers, who I don't really trust their defense. Now you can throw up the second one again real quick. This is also the same player. This is Thomas Greiss before and after going from the Islanders to Detroit. Now I want to make this point. Their save percentage differences are almost the exact same. It is literally 1 point difference. And this is where we get into goalies need to pick defenses before teams. As a goalie, if you want to succeed, you need a defense. And even great goaltenders, we're talking about Thomas Greiss, who is arguably should have been a starter on the Islanders, and then Bobrovsky, who's won the Vezina Trophy. And they're both significantly struggling against bad defenses. I wanted to throw you for a little bit of a loop today, just for the sake of it. But I think this is the point I need to make here, is before you get a goaltender, get some kind of a defense. A goaltender isn't going to solve the problem necessarily.
Well, to put that in other words, I mean, we talk about the NFL all the time. It's kind of get an offensive line before you get a quarterback.
Yeah.
It doesn't help. I mean, if the guy's getting bull rushed every single time by in the case of hockey, maybe Mahomes taking free shots on them all the time. It doesn't work. Pat Mahomes, Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, especially since your goaltender will more than likely automatically be better if he has to deal with less 2-on-1s and less breakaways and things of that nature. So this is just a throwing one out there of don't get the goaltender first, get the defense first.
Yeah, I think that's something, like we said, I can relate to tons of different sports all around the world. But we're done with your player comparison there, and I had no idea who these guys were. Clue.
Thomas, at least he knows who Thomas Greiss is, though, since we've been talking about him. It gives him more perspective on that.
I have a little idea. All right? I have a little bit of perspective, okay? I know the players' names you just mentioned. I know both those guys.
Okay.
So I'm learning, all right? We're getting there. But on to our next segment. It's Thinking or Dreaming. In this segment, by the way, we go out and we give each other 3 statements. We're going to do 3 statements this time instead of 2. But we give each other statements. This is not necessarily something we believe in, but we give them 3 statements. We tell them, is it thinking or dreaming? Is it realistic, or is it really unrealistic, or just plain stupid sometimes? So we're each going to give 3 statements. I'm going to start with mine, That's my first one. No player will ever come close to surpassing Tom Brady as the greatest player of all time.
I'm still gonna argue with you what I've argued with, and I understand he just lost the Super Bowl. I get it. But Patrick Mahomes will be seen differently because he will, in the end, have either more Super Bowl appearances or just more Super Bowls won, period. And here's why. Let's think about his first 3 years as a starter. The first year as a starter, he made it to the NFC Championship game, and as we've said a million times on this show, if it weren't for one offsides call, he would have gone to that Super Bowl. And who knows, there's a good chance he could have won that because they were playing the Rams. No offense there, and an inexperienced quarterback in Jared Goff. Then the next year, they went to the Super Bowl and won, and if they went to the Super Bowl again. Yes, they got pretty much owned by the Bucs, but the fact is they pretty much should have gone to the Super Bowl 3 years straight. And with the talent they have, as long as they keep it around, I don't think it'll be that consistent every time, but I think it's consistent enough that he's got a shot at beating Brady's numbers. And as we saw last week, they already are so far better than Brady's numbers.
So you're telling me that you think this is...
I think this is dreaming.
All right. Well, let me tell you this. There was a player in the NFL, his rookie season, went to the divisional round and lost to the eventual NFC champions. The following year, he won the Super Bowl. And the year after that, he went to the Super Bowl again and lost that Super Bowl. He's never been back. And
I know which player you're talking about, I think. I think this is Russell Wilson, no?
This is Russell Wilson.
This is the worst part of this.
I'm not saying that Patrick Mahomes and Russell Wilson are totally equal. I understand that. But look, things happen to teams. Patrick Mahomes cannot win this game by himself. He cannot carry the team to the Super Bowl every year by himself. And eventually, Travis Kelce, who I think is in his early 30s, Tyreek Hill is going to want a lot more money, a significant raise eventually. These guys, the offensive line, who they're going to have to pay, at some point, this is all going to come crumbling down. It's going to be because of how much money they're paying Patrick Mahomes. Because eventually it's going to hit around $40 million against the salary cap per year. So it's just inevitable that if you're not changing your roster constantly, you don't have constant turnover, your team's not going to be able to keep winning. We saw it happen with Seattle. I think it will happen with Kansas City unless the general manager there and the coach do basically what Bill Belichick did, which is have so much roster turnover every 2 or 3 years that people call you crazy. But in the end, it actually sustains your Super Bowl window.
Do you think they're smart enough to do that?
No. Because here's the thing. It's not that they're not smart. It's just that they're very dedicated. They are very dedicated to the players who got them to where they are. So guys like Travis Kelce, they'll probably hold on to Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, Tyrann Mathieu, these guys longer than they probably should. And that's when you start having the issue where your team starts declining because you have players who cost a lot of money but are no longer in their primes. So
gotcha. All right. Let's move on to my first one real quick. The Utah Jazz will make it to the finals. I will also note they are on top of their division right now.
Yeah, I will say that this is – I'm not going to say dreaming. I'll say it's thinking just because there is a possibility they get to that point. But I would highly doubt it for the reason that, one, I mean, they are 20-5, so they are top in the Western Conference right now. The Lakers are right behind them. They're 20-6. The Lakers have 2 of the 10 best players in the world. The Jazz don't have 1 in the top 10. So I think that the Lakers have an advantage. I think the Clippers have an advantage. The Clippers have 2 top 20 players. They have 1 top 10 player. The Jazz, I don't think the Jazz have a top 20 player in the world. So the Clippers, I believe, will have an advantage come playoff time. And again, like the NBA, the regular season matters, obviously, because you have to get into the playoffs, but it really doesn't matter once you get to the playoffs. I mean, LeBron, for a couple of years in the Eastern Conference, LeBron let the Toronto Raptors finish first in the conference and then just went out and beat the crap out of them in the playoffs. So I would say that I understand where you're coming from, but I don't think they're going to get there.
I just wrote this up.
No, it's fine.
I did the NBA standings because it was like, hey.
No, it's a good point. It's a good point, though. I mean, the Jazz are a talented team. I just don't see them getting that far.
So without a top 20 player, because this is interesting, because normally in the NBA to succeed, you need some kind of a star player. How do you think they've got such a good record without a top 20 player?
They have 2 top 30 players. And has a crazy – I know it sounds very ridiculous that I'm breaking down this tier system, but I spent a lot of time creating these lists of ranking these players. They have 2 top 30 players. One of them is Donovan Mitchell, shooting guard, averaging 24 points per game this year. The other one's Rudy Gobert, 2-time defensive player of the year at center. And doesn't score a lot offensively, only about 13 to 14 points per game, but gets a ton of rebounds. He's very good at altering shots. Even he gets 2.7 blocks per game, which is very high, a very high rate for the NBA. And then the number of shots he alters. So basically people will try to shoot around him, but they'll miss because he's so tall and so long that you have to just change your shot so much. Having those 2 really helps the team out. And they've got some good depth as well. It's just that when you hit the playoffs, it really is time for the superstars to shine. And while Donovan Mitchell played really well in the bubble during the playoffs this past season, they still lost in the first round. So I have trouble seeing them getting that far with the same roster they basically had last year.
Makes sense. Makes sense. All right, let's hear your second one.
All right, Deshaun Watson will play for the Houston Texans in 2021.
Dreaming. He's gone. He's going somewhere. I don't know where yet, but he's going somewhere. Honestly, I think I might have written this down as a thinking or dreaming question, so I'm not sure I can actually say this now. But we'll move on to mine then, because, yeah, I totally wrote this down. Watson could win a Super Bowl if he goes to the Colts.
Ooh, if he goes to the Colts, that's an interesting one. I think I would say yeah. I'll go with that. I'll bite. I think yes, there's a chance he could win a Super Bowl with the Colts just because I believe he's that good. And you give him an offensive line that's going to be top 5 in the NFL. Give him a defense that has Darius Leonard, DeForest Buckner. I think there's a chance because they were 11-5 this year with Philip Rivers. So if you add Deshaun Watson in there, you're probably 13-3 in the regular season. I think you have a good chance going into the playoffs because the only teams that I would look at in the AFC and think, wow, those teams would be just as good as Deshaun Watson, like Colts teams, would probably be the Chiefs and the Bills. And that'd probably be the only two in the AFC. And if you manage to get past either one of those teams who could suffer regression year to year, we don't know. The best teams coming out of the NFC, probably the Buccaneers. I don't even know what other team would be second place. Maybe the Green Bay Packers at this point.
Honestly,
so I think
this is going to sound a little nuts, but if Matthew Stafford does return to Pro Bowl form and gets that offense going a little bit, LA could be in that top 3.
Yes, but I feel a little more hesitant about LA because they have a lot of free agents this offseason. There's a lot of guys who are going to potentially lead the defense. So the defense can get a lot worse. So that's my one concern there is they have Troy Hill, who's a slot corner and split some time outside, Leonard Floyd, who had 10.5 sacks, I believe, this year, and John Johnson, who is their starting safety. All 3 of those guys are free agents. They're not going to be able to keep all of them. So I think there's a chance that the Rams get worse defensively and maybe level out as a 10 or 11 win team.
How much of a difference do you think the defense will have then?
Oh, it's significant. I think the reason they made the playoffs this past year was because of the defense alone. I mean, really, the golf had some.
Obviously, but I mean, like, how much of a difference in the defense do you think there will be?
Oh, because you're losing those guys. I see what you're saying. I think you can replace Leonard Floyd. You had Dante Fowler before that, who was an effective pass rusher, and you basically replaced him with Leonard Floyd. So I think you can switch that guy in and out as long as you have Aaron Donald playing at a healthy level. You'll be fine. I think the secondary is the bigger issue there because you had so many good players in that secondary that it was just almost impossible to throw against them for a while. The Rams are going to have a lot more difficulty now, though, because they're losing Troy Hill, like I said, talented slot corner who can play outside if you need him to, and a star safety in John Johnson III. So losing those guys, I think it's going to be a significant impact. I think you'll go from being the top defense to maybe still being top 10, but I think you could fall more in that 7 to 9 range, somewhere in there.
Yeah, still an acceptable defense.
Yeah, it's still acceptable. I think it's still good. It's still going to be good as long as Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey are there, but it just won't be great anymore.
All right, your third.
Yep, my third. The Ottawa Senators will finish with the worst record in the NHL this season.
Normally this is about the time I yell at my Red Wings, but holy cow, the Senators suck.
They're bad.
They're bad. So I'm going to have to say this is certainly thinking you got to know how bad it is when the Red Wings are doing better than you. That's how you know you're rock bottom. So, yeah, I think I'm going to have to go with thinking here, but with the caveat that the Detroit Red Wings could beat them out in the end because I feel like the Senators actually have more talent than the Red Wings do, but somehow are still playing worse. So yeah, odd thinking there.
You know the Devils have a better record than the Red Wings right now.
The Devils should have a better record than the Red Wings anyway. The Devils still suck too, by the way. PK Subban is a washed up, dead defenseman. They have no goaltending to be spoken of. They're just dead. They have a better record, but it's not because they're some great team. I think that is your third, so we'll move on to mine. If more players learned from Tom Brady's pay cuts, like Deshaun Watson, they wouldn't waste their careers.
All right, this is thinking. I totally agree here. Now, I will start off by saying this, though. You can't fault NFL players for wanting to get as much money as possible. You can't do that because they're thinking about their families, thinking about their friends, thinking about mentors. So it's things like this. And guys like Deshaun Watson grew up in government housing and then got a house from Habitat for Humanity. So this is a guy who grew up really poor and then has obviously built himself up to a point where he's a millionaire now. But
Right.
He came from nothing. So this is a guy who has charities he pays for, has a foundation. So there's a lot of stuff that money is going out of this man's pockets. So I don't blame people for wanting to negotiate and take the most money possible, especially when their careers are short and you can get injured and suffer a career-ending injury at any point in time. So I don't blame people for that. But if we're really thinking about building a championship, Tom Brady took massive pay cuts. Even right now, Tom Brady is significantly underpaid. I think $25 million per year is what he's making. That's significantly underpaid for Tom Brady. And he took massive pay cuts in the 2000s to really help the New England Patriots out, which is why they were so good for so long. When he started taking more money towards the end of the time with the Patriots, that's when they started struggling a little more. So I will say, yes, this is absolutely thinking. If you're Deshaun Watson, you take $25 million per year versus $40 million per year or something like that. That's a lot of money that can be spent on offensive linemen or receiving weapons, all that kind of stuff. It's just that, like I said, asking players to take pay cuts, I'm not a huge fan about that. But again, if you voluntarily do it, good for you. You're probably setting your team up to win.
Well, right. And if you're a superstar player asking for them to protect you with good offensive linemen and put weapons around you, if you're taking the money away from them to be able to do that, you can't really complain about it.
To some extent, no. But when your organization is as incompetent as the Houston Texans are, you can absolutely blame them. There are situations where you can go
but you get what I'm trying to say. I wasn't.
No, I understand what you're trying to say.
Example of the Houston Texans. The Houston Texans organization is garbage.
Yeah, they're terrible
as a whole.
So something funny happened with them recently. I just want to bring this up real quick. The team, I think it was the team president, sat on a firm that they had hired or a board they had hired to vet and figure out the new general manager for the team. So they presented them with the results. The team then went out and hired someone entirely different than what the guy had asked for. And someone they didn't consult Deshaun Watson about, by the way. So they didn't consult Deshaun Watson. They ignored the search firm they hired, along with their team president. And the team president recently resigned, and they said that he was convinced to stick around for 2 more months to try to present the false front that the organization was not as dysfunctional as it is. That's why he was still with the team for the past 2 months, is because they didn't want the team to look bad. So they asked him to stay around. And Houston's so bad.
This sounds like the whole Johnny Manziel thing where the Browns paid some people to tell them who the best quarterback was in the draft was. They told them who it was, and it wasn't Johnny Manziel, by the way.
And they picked Johnny Manziel anyway.
Johnny Manziel.
Yeah, no. Listen to the people who from the outside sources. Don't listen to your own biases. Listen to the people who know what they're doing. You paid them money. You might as well listen to them.
Yeah, if my good pastor were to tell you to go draft a quarterback, you listen to Mike.
Yeah, listen to the person who knows what they're doing. But
I think that's our last for Thinking or Dreaming. A little bit of an extended version today, but
yeah, that was a fun one though. We enjoyed that. So worth the time. We're gonna get into some NBA news here. So this is my neck of the woods. Anthony Davis plans to return to practice while dealing with tendinosis in his right Achilles. He's been very cautious. He's missed a couple of games right now. And when it's the Achilles, you just really don't want to push it, especially when you're the Lakers and you have your eyes set on winning championships. As I said, the regular season doesn't really matter. As long as you finish for the top 4 seed, you don't care. So I think that it's smart by Anthony Davis. Even if he missed a couple games here. And the Lakers with LeBron James still have a good chance of winning some of these games anyways. So missed a couple of games there. Interesting, though, the MVP debate right now. There's a bunch of names in there, of course, but top 2 right now are centers, Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic, so from the 76ers and from the Denver Nuggets. Now, last time a center won the MVP award with Shaquille O'Neal, I think it was 99 to 2000. I have to look it up real quick.
That is a long time ago.
Yeah, it's been a while. It was, 99 to 2000. I'm impressed I got that one right. So it's been 21 years at this point. And that's the longest time in NBA history, I'm pretty sure, where a center has gone without winning the MVP award. It's gone mostly to wings to guards at this point. And now we're seeing maybe a little bit of a resurgence here for the center position, which was supposedly dead at the start of the 2010s. And now it's really come back into the limelight where you have 2 greats now duking out potentially for the MVP award.
Interesting to see things change like that. I'd like to see that with the quarterback and the MVP award, but I kind of doubt that's going to be happening anytime soon.
Wait, they used to be, I think the comparison would be the running back to the center. So the running back was the heart of a lot of NFL offenses for a long time. And it was similar with the NBA. The center was the heart of the offense for a long, long time. Now it's perimeter shooters are the guys who are doing most of the damage. And with the NFL, same thing. It's the flashier people who are doing the damage. It's the quarterbacks, not the running backs at this point in time. So I think that's probably the ideal comparison between the NBA and the NFL.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see somebody else win for once. I think Derrick Henry, just for the 2,000 yards season, could have been in the conversation along with maybe Dalvin Cook. But I think Aaron Rodgers definitely deserves it this specific year. But I think they definitely need to get more variety in there, and heck, maybe even throw some defensive players in there if they're breaking some numbers.
So I will die on this hill. J.J. Watt should have won. I think it was Aaron Rodgers' second MVP award. J.J. Watt should have won that year. Watt had over 20 sacks that year. He caught 3 touchdowns because they moved him that tight end a couple times. J.J. Watt should have won that year. I'm still mad about
it. Just like T.J. Watt should have won the defensive player this year, kind of like that.
Don't start with me, McGinnis. I was streaming when that happened. I was just doing a solo stream. I was like, literally,
we're gonna get to that.
My mood changed. I went back and watched it. My mood the second I read that on my screen. Just you see like my face, just the change in my expression. I was so upset when that happened.
We'll get to that though. That's a little later in the show. I have it written down, so don't worry. We're not going to be forgetting about this.
All right, so to finish up the NBA news, because that's where we were starting this segment, actually. But to finish up the NBA news, the Heat have won 4 games in a row after Jimmy Butler's return. So the Heat start off the season very poorly. They're currently in the 9th seed right now in the Eastern Conference, so out of the playoff positioning. But they didn't have Jimmy Butler for most of it because of COVID-19. He lost like a bunch of weight in the span of a week and a half or so. But he's back now, and they said 4 wins in a row. So they're turning things around slowly thanks to Jimmy Buckets, but we appreciate that. And some players who missed most, if not all, last season have come back with a vengeance. Kevin Durant's averaging 29.5 points per game, and Steph Curry is averaging 30 points per game. They're both terrific three-point shooters at this point. So they are dominating right now, and their teams are they're struggling a little bit. I mean, Brooklyn's 3rd in the Eastern Conference, but they probably should be better. And the Warriors are 8th in the Western Conference, but they are still having great individual seasons.
Always nice to hear the NBA news from you, Sam.
Which means we get to turn to the NHL news from you, or the NHL standings or predictions, whatever you have for us today.
Yeah, there hasn't been a whole lot of news outside of just injuries and COVID-19 stuff. That's not all that exciting. I don't know about you guys, but I like to hear the exciting stuff. If there was like a massive injury or something, we'd be talking about it. But instead, we're going to be talking a little bit about teams that are surprising me, teams that are underachieving, and some top Stanley Cup contenders right now. The first one I want to throw out there, though, is for surprising me, teams that are surprising me right now are the Panthers. So we talked a little bit about Bobrovsky earlier, but despite all of what has happened to the Panthers last year, they're starting this season incredibly well, and even surpassing the Stars' good start that they were both having. And it's very interesting because the piece missing was defense and goaltending. And even without what I would consider adequate defense and goaltending right now, they're still succeeding to a high end. I do not expect this to keep up this way, but if the playoffs were to start today, they would certainly be in them. So just really crazy to see that from the Panthers with what you would consider to be holes in the team.
It's they're got 8 wins right now. They're 8-1-2, right?
Yep, and if I'm not mistaken, let me look at it real quick. Yeah, they're 2nd in the division, and they've played less games by 1 than the team that's on top, which is the Lightning, of course. And they've played 1 more game than the team below them. But yeah, it's interesting to see them start basically what you would consider 8-3, getting 18 points in that time. And just with holes and inconsistency we saw last year, you wouldn't have expected such a good start.
Yes, this one's caught you off guard a little bit, but are there any other teams that are surprising you right now?
Yeah, so I'll get to the third one in a minute, but the second one is the Maple Leafs, and this is very much so the same note. The Maple Leafs, now I don't discredit their goaltending. I don't truly trust Frederik Andersen, but he's a good goaltender. Their defense has been the issue for a long time, and inconsistency. Last year it was up, down, up, down, up, down, and then they would be back and forth right side by side with the Panthers there in complete inconsistency. And they start the season 11-2, I believe. Yeah, 11-2-1. they have been the essence of consistency. And this is just completely changing the narrative for them. Maybe it's for them, it's being able to get in a division where you would consider more teams that are easy to play. I'm not sure, but it is interesting to see life in a team that you would consider to be completely inconsistent and dead. And this goes back a little bit to what Joe Thornton said, which I still thought was a little nuts when he said it. He said, I wanted to go somewhere where I could win a Stanley Cup, and I think I can do that here. I thought that was an insane thing to say, but as you're looking at it now, it doesn't seem completely out of the possibility.
They're top of the North Division right now, 11 wins, 2 losses, and 1 tie, I believe. So they're got 23 points compared to the Canadians, who are down at 18. And that's a sizable gap, I would say, for this point in the season.
I mean, it's a game and a half. It's certainly doable, but they have a number of games, and the Leafs just beat them the other night 4-2. So interesting to note, because I think it is very possible that these two teams could end up playing each other for the divisional round, second round in the playoffs. So keep an eye on that matchup as they continue to play each other.
And we're not leaving the division for your third team on the list, who are the Jets, right?
Yeah, so the Jets got some pieces, but I wasn't expecting them to be where they are. If the playoffs were to end today, they would be in, and they are 8-4-1. They have nearly the same number of goals against as both the Maple Leafs and the Canadiens. Their goals for aren't that far off from both of those. And they're playing really good hockey right now. Honestly, they're better than the Oilers team that are ahead of them. Also note that Oilers team has played 3 more games than them, which could possibly be why they're ahead of them at all. And with Connor Hellebuck, it's a great goalie. You've got a shot. So very interesting to see a defense that was dead, this team to still do well as a result.
And they're not far behind the Canadiens, actually. The Canadiens have played 1 more game. So realistically, if they played another game, they could be ahead of Canadiens in second place in this division.
Yeah, this division actually, it was supposed to be garbage, but it's looking very good.
I almost, thinking you're dreaming, I almost said the North Division is the best division in the NHL, but I wasn't sure if that'd be too outlandish, so I just let it go.
I think that might be a little ambitious. I think I'd still have to go with the East. But yeah, they've definitely surpassed my expectations to this point.
Yeah, they played well. But looking at your top Stanley Cup contender in each division right now, I don't see the Maple Leafs or the Jets there.
You shouldn't. And I'll tell you why. The Canadiens this past qualifying round beat a Penguins team that is falling apart, but they looked really good. And the Canadiens got their offense going, and at the beginning of the year, they were the number 1 offense in the entire league. On top of that, you have a top 5 goaltender if he's in proper form in Carey Price, and you've got Shea Weber. Like this team is good enough to win a Stanley Cup, and they're starting to turn on what they should be. And honestly, if the Canadiens and Maple Leafs do play each other, I think the Canadiens have a better shot. I think the Maple Leafs, if they don't end up playing the Canadiens in the first round, will win whatever team they play. I think they're fired up enough now to finally get over that hump. But I think the Canadiens have a better shot in that sense.
Even though
they're lower in the standings, yes.
Okay. All right, who else do you got up there? Well, let's see. What do you think about the West Division? Who do you have at the top of that one?
So the West Division, I have the Golden Knights. This one should be pretty obvious. Fleury is back into form enough that he could potentially actually steal the starting spot back from Leonard, which is hilarious. But which goes back to the whole, for those who know it, the picture that Fleury's agent sent out of him getting stabbed in the chest by his organization. Literally, it was a photo of him getting stabbed because he wasn't anymore, which he shouldn't have been during that time, by the way. Leonard was the better goaltender then. Long-term future, I would still keep Leonard over Fleury. He's younger, and who knows how long it's going to last for Fleury. We don't know. But they've got 2 solid goaltenders, a defense that knows what it's doing. That sounds like recipe for success.
All right, so the Golden Knights, and the Golden Knights are currently atop their division right now, so that makes sense as well. The East Division, who do you have?
East Division, it's got to be the Bruins. I wanted to say the Flyers, If I'm really being honest, I think the Bruins have a better shot. But again, my pick for the Stanley Cup was the Flyers, so keep that in mind. You can make that pick and still understand that one has a better shot at it. I think the Flyers are really good at beating good teams, but I think ultimately Boston is the best team in that division and is on top of it. I kind of got to give it to them.
Well, I think you have to give it to him because Boston's beat the Flyers 4 times this year. So
yeah,
I think when you take that into account as well, it makes the win here pretty obvious, at least for now.
But for now, I think this will change. It's not yet, but the Flyers have opened the season well despite those losses. I believe they're second division right now, and they're owning their partners in the Penguins.
All right, yeah, and they have won the Penguins so far. I can't confirm that. But how about the Central Division? Who do you have coming out of that one?
How can you not have the Lightning? As annoying as it is for me to say that. The Lightning out of all these teams, I think, have a good shot at a repeat, as much as I would hate that. I think if they do get Kucherov back sometime in the playoffs, that would even increase their chances like it did when they got Stamkos back last playoffs, which helped boost them to the Stanley Cup victory over the Dallas Stars. I will say, though, if the Dallas Stars return to that form we saw at the very beginning of the season, they actually could give them a run for their money.
Speaking of the Dallas Stars, you think they're a highly underachieving team right now?
Yeah, so they're essentially 5-6. They're 5-3-3, which, is a decent NHL record. And they started the season with, and I remember talking to you about this the show before, about how their offense was continuing to do well with Joe Pavelski, and he is. But the fact is, you need to win more games. That's just the end of the story. I mean, look at where you are in the standings. You're 5-3-3. You're down there. You need to win more games. 5-6, I don't really see as totally acceptable for the level of talent this team has in its potential anyway. And if you can get that offense back to its normal, well, sort of normal form, then you legitimately have a shot to beat the Lightning and go on to a Stanley Cup. Now, that shouldn't be expected, but you at least have a shot then. In your current state, it's a lot harder.
Well, yeah, and considering where they were last year, you would expect them to be doing it a little better than they are right now. I mean,
yeah, you do have to say they've played 11 games, but at the same time, the Hurricanes are ahead of them, have played 11 games, and so are the Panthers. So I'm just not totally set on this yet.
I have to understand. I'd be a little hesitant and a little bit curious to see why things are going so poorly right now anyways. But if we wrap anything else you want to talk about from the NHL news? Anything else you want to talk about? Or are we moving on to our final segment here?
No, but I will say this about the Stars. They won't continue to be the underachieving team. They might be for a little while, but you watch. They'll come back. They'll make the playoffs.
All right. So the Dallas Stars will pull things together eventually. You heard it right here from Sam McGinnis. If they don't, I plan on coming back with vengeance and reminding him that he said this at some point in the future.
Hey,
but we get to move on.
Anyway, we don't need another person.
Yeah, that's true. Mike, we don't even know Mike's watching. He'll just be creeping around in Facebook, just watching this video, like writing down everything we say and try to come up with something he can bring up, a month from now or something like that, and just throw it in our faces again. But we'll move on to some NFL news, and we did have some news come out today. Actually, quite a bit of news come out. There was first off, the news broke that the Houston Texans have released J.J. Watt, star defensive end, future Hall of Famer, over 100 sacks in his career, 3-time Defensive Player of the Year. Only 3 players in NFL history have done that: Aaron Donald, J.J. Watt, and Lawrence Taylor. But he went to the Texans and he asked for his release from his organization. An organization that probably will be without Deshaun Watson next year. He's meant everything to Houston. He's helped them out quite a bit in the past with all his charity work. But he's been released. It saves the team $7.5 million towards the cap this coming season. And now J.J. Watt can go sign with a contender if he wants to.
Yeah, and how much you want to bet with our luck he'll go and sign with the Bucs somehow.
That's what I was worried about. I was hoping you weren't going to bring that up. That's what I was worried about.
I have a bad feeling. But, this is an interesting take. So J.J. Watt gets injured a lot, which has always been a thing I've been against. That was one of my biggest knocks on Carson Wentz.
Right.
Why the organization should have gotten rid of him earlier. Now, I'm not necessarily saying it was the right move to get rid of J.J. Watt, but in their current perspective, they're going to tank anyway. And J.J. Watt is getting a little older and he's injury prone. Is that really a player you want around for a rebuild? Maybe to teach the players something, but it shouldn't be too surprising anyway that they let him go. It's just the question of now where is he going?
Yeah, I'll say this. It wouldn't be shocking if they kept him around if he was cheaper. He's $17.5 million towards the cap. That's a lot of money. If he was $5 million, they probably would have kept him. But he asked for the release, or he asked to leave the team, go somewhere else. They granted that release. So now he's on the market. He is 31 years old, going on 32. He played all 16 games this past season, but he only had 5 sacks. So I think it's safe to say at this point, Watt's not a dominant pass rusher, but he's a solid pass rusher, more of a predominantly run defender, very good run defender still. So I think he's going to probably get somewhere between, I'll say, 8 to 14 million next year. Maybe less than that, maybe 8 to 12 million, I would think, on a very short-term deal. And he'll probably go to a contending team like a Tampa Bay, or maybe the San Francisco 49ers could get him. That would be an interesting one. Or maybe it'll be the Green Bay Packers, someone like that.
It would be even more interesting if he joined his little brother.
In Pitts, I would be all down for that. We have no money. We're broke. We have no money to go sign a guy like J.J. Watt. So that's unfortunate, but I would love to see him in a Pittsburgh Steelers uniform.
Hey, maybe if you got rid of Big Ben like you should.
Yeah, so we can start Dwayne Haskins. That's just the move I want to make.
You're screwed either way.
There's no good outcome. There's no good outcome, and I just have to accept that. I have no idea when Pittsburgh's going to be ultra competitive again, but we will hopefully see that happen some point in my lifetime. I've got
one more thing to say about J.J. Watt real quick.
Go for it.
Is there a chance, because we've definitely seen over his interviews how crushed he has been that he has not been able to deliver for the other Watson and obviously his team as a whole, and I think that's probably part of the reason he's leaving. Is there a chance that if he goes to a contender and they start winning games, some motivation comes back and he actually improves significantly on those stat markers you were talking about?
Well, I think he fought hard this past season. He's one of the few guys who actually really gave it their all for Houston. It's just that defense was so bad, and a lot of guys who are on that roster, just don't have the same heart, really. They knew they sucked, and they were playing like they sucked, and they kind of just accept the fact that, we're playing to lose almost at this point. So I think the mentality for J.J. Watt will still be there. He'll still work hard. It's just that you're fighting Father Time. You're fighting all these shoulder and back injuries you've had over time. That does degrade players, especially the back stuff. So I think that Watt will probably have a better year somewhere else. He'll probably do better than just past season. I think maybe 7 or 8 sacks is probably reasonable. But thinking that he'll get back to like an all-pro form is probably unrealistic.
And now we have that on tape. So just in case you're wrong, we can come back and
you know what? I would love to see all-pro J.J. Watt come back. I love watching J.J. Watt. He's one of my favorite players to look at. But because he does so many stuff. He does so many moves against the offensive line. He's so good. He's just so fun to watch him and watch his tape. But yeah, moving on from J.J. Watt, we do have to talk about the Super Bowl. Super Bowl 55 was a bit of a letdown. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers stopped the Kansas City Chiefs 31-9. Patrick Mahomes didn't have room to breathe. Is there any chance the Tampa Bay Buccaneers go out and they repeat next year?
Yes.
I don't want to think about that either. Okay, I don't want to think about it either. But
here's exactly why they lost this game. There are 2 reasons. Penalties, and the offense did literally nothing the whole game. Imagine this. If they hadn't even if they had taken all those penalties and it was still 31, you really think if the Chiefs were in proper offensive form that they couldn't put up more than 31 points? Or you think if they also didn't have all those penalties, the Chiefs shot themselves in the foot and also couldn't find an answer for Tampa Bay's defense? That's why they lost. It's not even necessarily Patrick Mahomes' fault. You look at he's made some of the greatest throws he's ever made that were incomplete because receivers can't catch. And even if
they hit off the face masks of his teammates, they hit off their helmets.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Defense needs to take less penalties, and you need to have a better, maybe offensive solution for the pass rush. If they had those 2 things, they would have been in much better places.
I did have backup tackles at both tackle positions, so that could be part of the reason. But I still think even if you have both starting tackles, Patrick Mahomes was under siege the minute the ball got to his hand from the snap. So he didn't have any time to breathe or create. So I think that even if you had both starting tackles, you'd still have been overwhelmed to some degree by the pass rush.
Well, I think a lot of that pass rush came from the outside.
Oh yeah, it was those were the guys who were going against the tackles. It was Shaq Barrett and JPP, the outside linebackers, getting in. But Ndamukong Suh actually he created a lot of havoc in the middle too. He had 1.5 sacks as well. I think coaching coaching played a role in this for sure. Bruce Arians and his staff were fairly calm. Todd Bowles, the defensive coordinator, had a fantastic game plan. And Andy Reid's offense just looked shell-shocked to some degree. And I don't know if you saw this part, but before halftime, like Kansas City called timeouts because they wanted to get the ball back.
Yep.
And Tampa Bay goes down and scores a touch. That to me was like, it's Tom Brady. It's Tom freaking Brady. You're calling the timeouts for Tom Brady. This is the thing that he did in New England forever. He would score right before the half, less than a minute left. And you were calling the timeouts for Tom Brady. And it didn't make any sense. To me, the coaching clearly was one-sided towards Tampa Bay this time around. Andy Reid has had some great game plans in the past. I think the way they handled Buffalo was fantastic game, but they just flat out got out-coached and outplayed against the Buccaneers.
All right, that topic is done. We can move on now.
Yeah, I think we're probably beating that one to death. But Trevor Lawrence, by the way, he had his pro day today. Clemson's usual pro day is going to be, I think, in a couple of weeks. But Trevor Lawrence has his own separate pro day because he's going to have surgery on his non-throwing shoulder. It's going to be a 4 or 5 month rehab process. Now, I'm told it's going to be a much shorter span before he can start throwing again. He'll start throwing, I think it was 4 to 6 weeks after surgery, so only about a month and a half after surgery, but the whole rehab process will take a little bit longer than that. So, and by the way, Urban Meyer, the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars, was right there, smack dab in the middle of the pro day, literally standing about where the linebacker would be standing if he was on the defensive side of the ball. So he was standing front and center watching Lawrence play. It's basically confirmed Jacksonville's going to take Trevor Lawrence, barring a huge setback. So I think that it's just something fun to watch, go out and look at the pro day, and I think we can cement the idea that Trevor Lawrence is going number 1 to Jacksonville.
Usually you can say with confidence what the number 1 pick is going to be from year to year, and I don't think this is any different.
Yeah. All right, something more interesting. Some landing zones for Deshaun Watson. You put this up here.
Yeah.
What do you think is the best situation for Deshaun Watson in 2021?
Well, it's either the Colts or the 49ers. So
not Miami?
Miami, I know you keep thinking Miami is in contention for grabbing a quarterback. They're set. They have what they think their guy is. They're not going to be grabbing big names. I think the problem with the 49ers is this. You're in a division that's going to be really tough. You're going to have to play Matthew Stafford, Russell Wilson in the same division. And that's already one of the best divisions in football. And if I want to look at this real quick, because I'm for some reason blanking on the last name, but it's an incredibly tough division. And I don't think you can say the same thing about, and Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray, Russell Wilson, and Matthew Stafford in the same division. That's pretty tough. Of course, that would be then probably the best division in football to then watch, because every time they played each other, you'd have a great quarterback matchup. But I think it would actually make more sense to go to the Colts here, because the only team you really have to play that's significant in that division is the Titans.
Yeah. I think that would be an easier division to play in. There's just one problem.
The Houston Texans are in that division.
Texans will never let that happen. Not in a million years are they going to let him go to the Colts. I understand what you're saying. The Colts would probably be an ideal landing spot because the offensive line, they have some receiving weapons there. They have a good running back. The defense was solid as well. But the Houston Texans, there's no way in hell they're letting that happen. That would be one of the dumbest moves they could make, because Deshaun Watson would be kicking their butts from now until 2025 or whatever. So 2030 or something like that. It'd be forever before they would get him out of that division.
Yeah, and if the 49ers then are the most likely place he could go, that would be the best for him anyway. Yeah, that would be an insane division to watch, and I think I'd be looking forward to watching some of those games, because, again, there wouldn't be one time those teams played that wouldn't be a good QB matchup.
Yeah, I'll agree with you. The 49ers are, I think, an ideal destination for almost any quarterback at this point. But to me, it's them. They're probably the best landing spot for Deshaun Watson. And the most likely spot is probably Miami, just because of the assets they can offer up to get Deshaun Watson. Also, New York has similar picks, similar players, but I've heard Deshaun Watson isn't really interested in going to New York. It's kind of like a team he would be okay with if he had to be, but he doesn't really want to go there.
How much you want to bet that's because the Jets? You know, how many times have we seen players try and give like alternative reasons to the reason everybody knows what the actual reason is?
Yeah, here's the thing. Detroit.
It's the Jets. It's because it's Detroit. That's why Jared Goff was upset. He knows what's about to happen.
Detroit, the Jets, the Bengals, usually the Browns, but maybe not this year, maybe not in the future because of what they've done. But those are the teams you don't want to go there.
I would throw the Jags in there.
The Jags, Houston. Houston's in there now too.
Houston is in there. Another interesting spot would be the Patriots. I think if they could get him, that would be a significant improvement. I think Bill Belichick is smart enough to turn this team with Deshaun Watson into a playoff team next year, potentially.
Yeah. And if you're Houston, you can never allow that to happen. You have to recognize that the fate of the football universe is relying on you to not give Bill Belichick Deshaun Watson. You have to do what's best for the world, not what's best for you, and take Deshaun Watson away from New England.
I think the best option for both the fans outside of Houston and the world of sports as a whole would probably be the Colts. Either that or the 49ers. If you like good matchups, the 49ers, but at the same time, that would make it harder for Matthew Stafford to do anything, and that would piss me off. So go to the Colts.
All right, if you say so, but you could also send him to Miami, and he could play Bill Belichick twice a year, and that'd be fun to watch as well.
But he's not going to Miami. I keep telling you, Miami is not going to pick up a big player because they think their answer is Tua.
And they'd be insane if they think that, because I think Deshaun Watson is 10 times better than Tua.
He is, but they're not going to go after Deshaun Watson like a team that absolutely has no one is going to.
All right, well, we'll see, McGinnis. I have a feeling we're going to be talking about this for a couple of months. So this is going to be a long-running storyline that we're going to have to wait to see how it plays out. Carson Wentz, officially on the trade block. Chicago has put in offers. The Colts have put in offers, and we know that the Colts offered at least 2 second-round picks. No first-round picks from what I've heard. So the top teams in the bidding war for Carson Wentz have not offered first-round picks. Meanwhile, Jared Goff fetched 2 first-round picks. Well, actually, when the trade for Jared Goff, where Stafford went to L.A., Goff went to Detroit.
I was about to bring this up. They gave him 2 first-round picks, a third-round pick, and Jared Goff. I want to point this out. The league knows what quarterbacks are sometimes, and I think this is very much so true with Carson Wentz. I was never, except for a short period of time, which you guys darn convinced me otherwise of my own opinion, which I should have kept with. Carson Wentz is not the superstar everybody thought he was. He's not going to be. He's going to be better than he was this last season. I think this is, again, the worst version of Carson Wentz there is.
Yeah.
But he's not a guy that's going to be winning MVPs. He had 1 year. He had 1 year. And I think the league recognizes that Matthew Stafford was better, at least on a consistency basis, because he is. Not to say Matthew Stafford is like a top 5 quarterback. He's not. But he's definitely, I think, I would take Matthew Stafford over Carson Wentz.
I would too. I absolutely would. The thing is that Wentz is on a similar contract to Jared Goff, and we know that probably one of the first-round picks LA sent to Detroit was basically to take Jared Goff's contract on, sort of like a salary dump for them. So my question here is, in what world do the Philadelphia Eagles think? Because how general manager Howie Roseman for Philadelphia Eagles wants to hold on to Carson Wentz until he gets offered a first-round pick and more?
I think this. I think you either have a first-round pick or more. You can't go with both. I don't think he's worth both. I think a first-round pick is fair for Carson Wentz. I think that 1 first-round pick is fair for Carson Wentz. Or you give him a few decent players for Carson Wentz. Like if you had a couple of decent defensive players for Carson Wentz, that would be fair. But you have to find the correct medium. Of course, in modern-day NFL, where you're paying 2 first-round picks, a third-round pick, and Jared Goff for Matthew Stafford is not right. So
the equivalent is very messed up.
Maybe they're hoping to cash in because, honestly, I would almost say the same thing about Matthew Stafford. He's worth a first-round pick, yet he got to a third and a player that's actually decent. LA is desperate, I think, is a fair statement when coming to that contract.
Yeah, it's just a question of, I mean, Howie Roseman's not going to trade Carson Wentz right now until he gets a first-round pick and some extra stuff for him. He's not going to get that, though. No team in the right mind is going to give a first-round and extra draft picks. It's going to be just 1 first-round pick, or it's going to be 2 second-round picks, and that's probably about it because Carson Wentz right now, I mean, they trade for Stafford, the Rams traded Goff, 2 firsts, and a third. So in what world is some team going to give up a first and extra for Carson Wentz? It just isn't going to happen.
Yeah, no. And honestly, again, the Colts would have been nice for Matthew Stafford, but I think the organization has to be reasonable here with Carson Wentz. And honestly, if you're taking 2 second-round picks, I mean, wasn't Dallas Goedert a second-round pick?
He was.
You can still do things with second-round picks, so don't just throw them out. And first-round picks don't always pan out. So, and in fact, I would almost say 2 second-round picks could potentially, in the end, be better than 1 first.
Yeah, because you think about a first-round pick, there's still potential for a player you pick to bust. And Philadelphia's had some very interesting first-round picks in recent history that haven't really worked out. But the second-round picks, I mean, you're still potentially drafting starters in the second round. So I think that's a reasonable deal. I would still try to hold out a little bit longer. You obviously have to trade Carson Wentz before this draft for it really to make any sense because you need the draft picks. But I think you hold out and try to get a first. I think where you send Carson Wentz to the Colts with a 5th-round pick and you get a first and a third in return or something like that. Maybe try to pull something like that. But the thing is, Carson Wentz is going to move here before the draft, and you're probably not going to get as much as you want from him here, Philadelphia.
Here's a crazy take. I'm not saying this will happen, but it would be interesting to see that go down in the middle of the NFL draft.
In the middle? That'd be interesting. In the middle of the first round, that'd be fun.
That would be very fun. I just thought about this as you were talking about this. I wonder if they're thinking maybe a team will be desperate enough for Carson Wentz in the draft at that point that they'll be able to trade up at that time.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there are draft day trades. They happen. It usually just doesn't involve a player. It usually just doesn't involve a high caliber player of someone's like Carson Wentz, who's obviously not like a top 10 quarterback or anything right now, but he's still a very popular name, a guy who was almost an MVP.
Talent guy.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that it'd be very interesting. I don't think it will happen because it so seldom happens, but I think it would be very interesting. You know what? I'd be all for it. If it happens undrafted, that'd be very fun, especially because I've got a bunch of Philadelphia Eagles fans and they'd be absolutely losing their minds if it did happen. So I would love to see that. I'd just love to see their reactions.
And pardon me, I think what I should be saying is it would be more likely for the Eagles to get desperate and then on draft day just take one of the offers that's
true as well.
Yeah, because the other thing I said makes no sense, so we're just going to go with that.
Either way, it'd be a lot of fun to look at. But your last point here, TJ Watt should have won Defensive Player of the Year. All right.
Oh boy. Yeah, since you're the guy that is the Pittsburgh guy, I will let you break this one down. And
so Watt, I believe, had more tackles for loss, more pressures, more sacks. If he had they had the number of forced fumbles he had last year. This year, I think it would have been clear-cut TJ Watt. The one thing one of my Rams friends pointed out to me was that Down faced a higher percentage of double teams and still won a higher percentage of pass rushes against double teams than someone like TJ Watt. I don't know, man. I really this was probably the worst of Aaron Donald's Defensive Player of the Year seasons. He's got 3 of them now. This is by far the worst one of those 3, and it was significantly worse. So I think that if you were going to have I'm mad. I'm really mad about this. This really mad. I was going into the night thinking that TJ Watt was going to win Defensive Player of the Year. Alan Faneca was going to go into the Hall of Fame, which he did, which was nice. But I thought TJ Watt had it locked down, and he didn't. It's very disappointing, McGinnis. I'm very disappointed.
Yeah, I mean, and I saw a stat sheet that had maybe 10 plus statistics on it, and Aaron Donald beat him in 1.
Yeah,
I think this may have been a mistake on the league's part.
I don't know. I think realistically, if I'm being totally unbiased, it was closer than some people are willing to admit it was. And I can understand why Aaron Donald won it, but I still think that Watt only played 15 games and led the NFL in sacks, tackles for loss. He had by far more quarterback pressures than Aaron Donald. I just think that would be, like I said, I think TJ Watt deserved it this year, and it's hard to match the numbers he's put up 2 years in a row now. 2 years in a row, he's had great numbers. And at some point, you're not going to be able to match those anymore. So if DJ Watt retires at some point without winning a Defensive Player of the Year award, I'll be very upset.
And I will say, since you were mentioning the double teams, this does actually translate a little bit into hockey in the Vezina Trophy this last year. Connor Hellebuyck, who had worse numbers than both Tuukka Rask and I think Vasilevsky was the other person up for it. I don't remember who the other guy was, but they both had better numbers than Connor Hellebuyck did. But Connor Hellebuck was also behind one of the worst defenses in the entire NHL and was putting up great numbers still. So you can understand how there should be some recognition for that. But the question here is, was that enough to really put Aaron Donald above? I don't know, but that is up for the individual judgment.
Yep. But all right, McGinnis, I think we're going to wrap it up here for the show. So it's been a long one, but it's been a fun one. Tell everyone where we can find you where they can find you on Twitter, and tell everyone about the NHL show.
Yeah, so you can find me at SamuelMCG22. So for the NHL show, I've been doing that with Jack Woods, who works for the Penalty Box Radio, I believe. He should be on for this next week's show as well. We're going to be finishing up our talk about how the NHL teams are doing. And hopefully from there, we can just get into some more NHL stuff. I know we have dropped the NHL show a number of times. There was really only one time it was consistently on this network. It was a good time. We had some good viewership, and I look forward to getting back to that. So if you look forward to NHL show and occasionally on the NFL show also, you can find that stuff.
You can follow me at Sam_Teets33 on Twitter for my latest articles, polls, stats, and all that kind of stuff. I'm currently working on an article for the top 200 players in the NFL entering 2021. So
that I just want to say something just to credit you on this. Listen, just because the amount of words aren't always like the longest, when the more people you add or the more teams in an article, that adds a lot of time to it. I can say from personal experience, I wrote an article for another network recently that discussed just a tiny section of every NHL team. That took me a long time.
Yeah, I did a mock draft recently. It was 9 pages long. You know, that's not double space. It was 9 pages. So it's
great in college papers.
I really am. But I always said this: college was fun. If college classes were fun and about sports, I would easily have knocked it out in a day. But you know, it's just not as fun. Now I can write college-length papers easily about sports, and that's why someone needs to hire me and pay me money to do it, because I am good at it and I'm willing to do it. So it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it, even though it's a lot of work. But
Sam Teets knows what he's doing. Hire him. I'm too young to be hired yet.
Yes, give me an opportunity. Give me an interview. But anyways, I do have to wrap it up by reminding everyone the sponsor of the Sam and Sam Show and the Grueling Truth Sports Network in general is pathofpurity.direct. If you go to them and do this through the Grueling Truth, you can get 2 months supply of CBD, high-grade CBD, for the price of 1 month. So remember to check out pathofpurity.direct. It helps with the show, helps the network, and we appreciate them keeping the website alive right now and helping us out. We really do appreciate that. But for now, thank you for listening to Sam and Sam Show. We will be back next Friday at, I believe, our usual time at 9:30 again. We'll get back to getting back to that 9:30 time. We appreciate you guys tuning in this week. We hope to see you next week for Sam McGinnis. I'm Sam Teets, and you've been listening to The Grueling Truth